Wir haben die Ausstellung Cecily Brown, das ist eine der besten Malerinnen, glaube ich, der jüngeren Generation, die im Moment wirklich ganz neue Wege erobert. Welcome, Cecily. Come with me, please. So, ich möchte jetzt meinen zweiten Gast, das geht ja fast wie im Fernsehen, hier ist wunderbar, kommt immer zum richtigen Zeitpunkt. Thank you for coming in the right time, in the right minute.
Dankeschön.
Ich habe, I say some words in German and then we switch into English. Als ich auf der Suche nach der Malerei der Gegenwart war, Sie wissen das alle, Kunsthalle IV habe ich vorhin gesagt, und dann kam mir eigentlich, oder wurde mir sehr deutlich, dass es um ganz spezifische neue Vorstellungen von Malerei geht, die viele junge Künstler beschäftigen. Das ist nämlich die Vorstellung, dass Gedächtnisbilder auf die Malerei übertragen werden und nicht mehr die klare, sichtbare Realität. Und das in ein Kompositionsgefüge einzubringen, wie es so in diesem Sampling-Verfahren früher eben nicht der Fall war. Und dabei sind mir unglaublich viele tolle Künstler aufgefallen aus der ganzen Welt, muss ich sagen, unter anderem eben Cecily Brown, die in London geboren wurde, 1969, und heute in New York lebt. Wir hatten damals in der Direktmalerei zwei Bilder, in die sich sowohl Herr Marx als auch wir verliebt haben. Wir fanden die unglaublich scharf und toll und wirklich direkt. Das war ein Black Painting. Wir haben unten dann in der Halle eins auf der rechten Seite und eine zweite sehr naturabstrakte Vorstellung. Ich wusste damals nicht, weil ich sie nicht so gut kannte, dass genau das Dialogische für ihr Werk extrem wichtig ist. In Modern Art Oxford, and do you want to have this exhibition afterwards? Should I ask the collectors? And I said, I have to think 1 week because I have no money. And then I thought 1 week, and after this I decided yes, and some people helped me in between. And then I never have been in Oxford, but I saw the paintings, and then I understood that it was very important to show her works now and not later, because I think Cecily has an enormous intensity, energy in her paintings, and today we have, I think, 18 or 19 works that show this beautiful view. I already asked you before, what's going on when you start a painting? How do you start?
First, I'd like to say I'm sorry for not speaking in German. I apologize for that. Well, I just begin. I often start several canvases at once. I always work on more than one, sometimes between 3 up to 20 canvases in the studio at one time. When I begin, I love to begin. I have a big brush, I have often a thin one wash of color, and I start. Often the painting, I don't start with a clear idea of what I want the painting to look like. I have there are usually several themes that I'm working on at one time, but I like to just play it by ear, see what happens as I go along. Often a few marks and something is suggested very quickly, and that will be the basis of the painting. But sometimes a painting goes for a few days or a week, but more likely a few months, sometimes up to a year. So over the course of many weeks or months, it changes a lot. I like to, something happens in one painting, and then that gives me ideas for what to do in the next. I put things away, I put things aside, and then come back to them. But it's very much a relationship between the works. One thing sparks off an idea for another.
And these ideas, you have to paint. You start with images in your head, you start with some lines, with concrete things, or it is more, let's say, a coordinative system, something like that?
Well, I feel like I have so many images in my head that that's not really a problem, that really just beginning they come so quickly. They're sort of flooded with images. In a way, it's more of a problem. I think I've always had this problem of wanting to put everything in one painting. And so that's one of the reasons I like have more than one at once. But there's a kind of lexicon of imagery that I go back to. Sometimes things occur. You know, there are paintings. There was a series of paintings nearly 10 years ago of rabbits, bunny rabbits in the woods, kind of violent, nasty paintings. The paintings, this was a subject that I felt, you know, I worked on 10 years ago. The rabbits had become more like figures, human figures. And I felt that I'd left the bunnies behind, the rabbits. And then 3 years ago, I did a little drawing. It made me start thinking of them again. So the bunnies reappeared. And this happens more and more. The longer I paint, the more I go on, something will come up again that I think I've left behind. So it's like a kind of cycle. Things recur all the time, and sometimes they go to the background of my memory, you know. But each painting, I work very much with what is suggested by the painting as I work.
We have, in the main hall, we have 4 paintings in a corner dialogue, figures and, let's say, more abstract paintings, and on the other side we have 3 paintings, the black, the skull and the red one. And there are for me, two important things to understand, or I understood the days when you have been here for the installation. There is the transformation of one thing into another, of one element or one subject into another, a figure into an animal, nature into figure, and everything else. On the other side, we have not the opposites, but we can see clearer when we see a figure and see besides almost abstract painting, we think. Then we start to find out some elements of a figure, some bones, some, I don't know, a leg, a face or something else. So what I mean is you make always a dialogue between these two poles, and you bring a lot of different images in these paintings. This is what I realized here. And I think you like very much the skull in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, first, it's the most recent. So I think one always feels closest to the most recent thing. The skull, it comes from a found image. I didn't invent it. It comes from a 19th century print. And I suppose in a way I feel that it somehow brings together everything I've been thinking about. In a way it condenses these ideas of that I always play with between abstraction and figuration, when something is not what it seems, when just as you think you understand the image, it shifts and changes into something else. And it brings in, it makes you very conscious of the act of looking at something and what it means, the way that the mind and the eye sort of conspire to make a form. Because a lot of I said to you earlier, I don't like to use abstraction and figuration anymore as terms, because when I paint, it's the same. It's all the same for me. Also, when I look at other people's paintings, I don't use a different part of my mind. It's all the same thing. Sometimes the figure disappears more. Sometimes it's much clearer. Sometimes if I have 5, I never call them abstract really. When it's broken down more, when it's more dissolving. If the imagery is almost disappearing, then I always want to do a painting where it's very clear, like the black painting. But I really want to play with I've always wanted to see how little information you need to give so that the mind invents the rest. So can you just give an elbow and that you can imagine the rest of the figure? How much in the power of suggestion? So rather than, I also have a tendency to overstate things, I think, or say things in 10 different ways. But I've always been, had an ambition to be able to give just a fragment, and for the mind to take it from there, and so that it really opens up the imagination.
I think when I see it right, that every work, every painting is a little cosmos of some elements, and some elements are more concrete, some less, and from that, what you said, the real perception starts into the world of the painting, and this is what is, you are catched to come deeper and deeper, and this is what I learned from these paintings. That's why I think they're really extremely good, and we can learn again about painting. That's the beautiful. What about sex? Not in your life, but in the paintings.
Well, it's a subject that I've used off and on over the years. Partly, I mean, there are so many reasons. The paintings of the past that I've been drawn to a lot are nearly always the depiction of flesh, nudes, but also I've loved paintings with a very dramatic content or very emotionally charged content, whether it's things like the Massacre of the Innocents or the Rape of the Sabines, things like that, but usually just flesh in old master paintings is the thing I've always loved looking at the most. And I think, so when I started painting, I wanted to paint flesh, but I was bored quite quickly by just doing a single figure. I wanted to have something more going on. And so 2 figures in a room, very quickly I put them together. And this is at the age of about 17, and since then I've just gone back and forth with the subject. I like the fact that there are so many things to say about it. One thing is I like the fact that it's easy to understand, everybody gets it, and everybody can relate to it in some way. There is an element of wanting to grab the attention. I understand that in a world full of so many competing images, you want to do something, especially in painting, that makes somebody stop and look. I think when I first started painting, I was so aware that I felt like people had slightly forgotten how to look at painting because we were so used to video and moving imagery. And I noticed that people tended to look for 3 seconds, perhaps. So I really wanted to make them look, make them stop. The trouble sometimes with the sexual imagery is that people think it's easy to think that's it, that's the subject. Years ago, when I started, nearly all the paintings were sexual, and it became a problem for me that I didn't think people were looking at them as paintings, but just at the subject. So I think I've gone further away from it, but then every so often I just want to do something very clear and bring it back. But I like to have paintings that are very emotionally charged, and the idea for me is always to make someone stop, but then to keep them there looking for much longer, and that the more they look, the more layers of pleasure will be revealed. Then of course there's quite literal things like the movement of the paint could be very similar to that of the body, and so on. I should shut up because I could keep going.
No, that's beautiful. But we go a little bit later. We go into the central room. We have 3 rooms with paintings. The central hall, Vetter Forum. Besides the smaller room, then we have here in the so-called body space. I try to have a dialogue between the sculptures from the collection and 2 of her works. It's a radical situation. I think it works here. And we have 2 paintings downstairs in the context of nature, Richard Long and others. I think it gives, again, a little bit more of possibilities, but I think the best space is really the Vetter Forum.